Good morning, FCF, or afternoon if you happen to be watching it afternoon. We are in day 5 where we're looking at passages of scripture that are associated with stones, and I know that sounds kind of unusual. Today we're in 2 Samuel. We're still in the life of David. We were last week, but by this time David is in his 50s. He's been king for over 20 years, maybe 27 years at this point, and he's had a terrible thing happen. I have to fill in a little bit of blanks. David has a few wives, which in those days, though it was not God's first choice, he allowed it. He just let these things go on. And he had one son, Amnon, by one wife, and he had another son, Absalom, by another. Well, Amnon, he falls in love with Absalom's sister. I know this is a little complicated. So Absalom and Tamar have the same mother. Amnon has a different mother. He falls in love with his sister Tamar. Well, it's a sister, so she's not interested in him. Well, he finally gets so overwhelmed by his desire for her that he ends up raping her. Well, she's completely destroyed by this. She doesn't even know what to do, and so she runs to her brother Absalom, who, when he finds out about it, is enraged and makes up his mind, he'll kill Amnon when the time is right. He waits a couple of years, and sure enough, he does. He kills him. When he kills his brother Amnon, he then flees the kingdom for about 3 years. He knows David is just terribly upset about the whole thing. About 3 years later, David lets him come back, and Absalom starts this little hidden campaign where when people would come to David for decisions and counsel and so forth, Absalom would confront them first, and he'd say, boy, if I was king, I would do this and that and the other to help you and deal with this situation. And so he was undermining his father's leadership the whole time. This goes on for 3 years, and finally it reaches a stage where Absalom has won the confidence of a lot of the army, and a coup takes place. He literally sets out to kill his own father and to take over his kingdom. So David, after over 25 years at this point, ruling and reigning over Israel, he has to grab the pieces of his army and run for his life. As he is in humiliation, he's brokenhearted, he's humiliated, he's running for his life with his soldiers. A man who was loyal to King Saul, who was the first king of Israel before David, he comes onto the scene. The man's name is Shimei. He's our star in this particular portion of Scripture. Let me pick up reading in 2 Samuel chapter 16, starting in verse 5. As King David approached Bahurim, a man from the same clan as Saul's family came out from there. His name was Shimei, son of Gera, and he cursed as he came out. He pelted David and all the king's officials with stones, though all the troops in the special guard were on David's right and left. As he cursed, Shimei said, "Get out of here, get out, you man of blood, you scoundrel." Let me pick up in verse 11. David said to Abishai and all the officials, because the officials wanted to kill this guy, and David stops them. Verse 11, David said to Abishai and all the officials, "My son, who is my own flesh," meaning Absalom, "is trying to take my life. How much more then this Benjamite? Leave him alone. Let him curse, for the Lord has told him to. It may be," verse 12, "it may be that the Lord will see my distress and repay me good for the cursing I am receiving today." So David and his men continued along the road, while Shimei was going along on the hillside opposite him, cursing as he went, throwing stones at him and showering him with dirt. So here's this terrible season in David's life. His son's trying to kill him. He's running for his life. He is dispossessed from his kingdom. And then there's this loyalist to King Saul, who's cursing him and hitting him and his men with stones and kicking dirt at them as he goes along. Now, David's response to this is interesting. He stops his men from killing Shimei. He says, "Leave me alone." He says, if he's cursing, it's the Lord. He says, what more can happen to me? My own son wants to kill me. Let this Benjamite curse me. But then David says something interesting. He said, maybe the Lord will look upon me and he'll see my distress and be favorable toward me. So David is dealing with a situation that is not that uncommon in life. Now this Benjamite, this Shimei, chances are he had never had a conversation with David, never had any interaction with David, but he didn't like David for his own unique reason. One of the hardest lessons for human beings to learn but that we are wise to learn sooner than later, but it usually doesn't take place till you're maybe in your late 30s or 40s, is that there are just going to be some people in life that for no reason that makes any sense, they just don't like us. And when they get an opportunity to slander us or hurt us or disparage us in some way, they're going to do it. Think of Jesus. Jesus himself was an enemy to the religious leaders of his day, and they slandered him and ultimately set up his execution. So you may have a Shimei in your life right now who is throwing all the stones they can find at you, cursing you, kicking all the dirt on you that they can, and it never feels good. It's not like we ever get to the place where it feels good to be disliked, even when we know we've done nothing to deserve it. But David gives us a great example here. When these stones, when these undeserved stones and undeserved dirt is being kicked at us and stones thrown at us, we would be wise to do what David did. And he turned it to the Lord. He said, Lord, I'm not going to retaliate. I'm not going to strike back. I'm going to trust you. Maybe you'll see the distress that I'm in, and maybe you'll answer this circumstance. It's a wise way to handle these kinds of things. Jesus alluded to something very similar, when he said, hey, if somebody slaps you on one side, turn your cheek to the other side. For you that are self-defense minded, please, this doesn't mean that if somebody breaks into your house, you're not to protect yourself and your family. It is a relational principle that when we can absorb insult, undeserved in particular, without it hurting or endangering somebody else, it's wise to do so and entrust ourselves to a loving God who will judge and more than often come to comfort us in such situations. Hope nobody's cursing you. Hope nobody's throwing stones at you or kicking dirt. But if they are, why not follow what David did and turn the situation toward the Lord? Thank you so much.